All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is an answer for quora. Romina asks, how far are Jews allowed to walk outside the eruv on a Sabbath? Interesting way of writing eruv, but I know what you're talking about. First of all, there are three types of eruvin. Generally, when people just plainly say eruv, they mean eruv chatzeros. Eruv chatzeros means a mixture. So eruv chatzeros means a mixture of courtyards, and the way that is done is through if there is already a wall around an area, you cannot simply carry from one home to another even though there's a wall around it. You have to have some sort of a shared piece of bread or something, food item, and that is what mixes the community, because they all own this piece of bread. Usually there'll be something like a box of matzah, and that box of matzah within the walls of the community means that they're all one community. It's a symbol of the unity of the community. And that is what is called the eruv, is the bread. The walls could be any types of walls, including a door. And so that's where it comes in. What most people say is the eruv up, is the eruv down. You know, like the barriers on the, a fence is a wall. The barriers on the highway is a wall. If there's continuous surrounding that, but every now and then there is a door, and there has to be the form of a door. The form of a door would mean that there is two lintels and a lechi and koras. Two lechim and a quora. Meaning lechi, I think, is the lintel, and the quora is the top part of the door. And so often we will use, if electric poles, for example, if the wire goes on top of the pole, that is a form of a door. And if not, you can have poles and strings, and as long as the string goes on top of the pole, that is the form of a door. Or if the string doesn't go on top of a pole, you can put another pole under the string to make it, and the pole doesn't have to go all the way up, but that already creates the form of a door. And so often strings or wires or other things are used to create the form of a door to represent that. And it's not representative the way that the bread is more representative. The bread is the actual eruv. The strings are just what are really the form of a door, the tzuras HaPesach, and that will surround. Or often what they might do is put some, if there is electric pole and the wire doesn't go directly over the pole, we can put a pole next to, or attach it to the pole, so that pole would be underneath the wire, and it forms the form of a door. Because, like, you can have walls, and then you can have doors within the walls. And so some communities, the entire eruv is the forms of the doors surrounding the community. Again, that's not actually what the eruv is, but the forms of the doors that surround the community where the eruv is. Now, the purpose of that is, like we said, items that are allowed to be handled on the Sabbath, but one of the Sabbath rules is that we do not bring things from a private domain to a public domain, or from one private domain to another private domain. Now, our understanding is that biblically a public domain is only where there's a certain amount of people, 600,000 people, like left Egypt, because the laws of the Sabbath are learned from the tabernacle. And so in the times of the tabernacle, there were 600,000 adult men. There were really more people than that, but that's what we count. And that's where, what are we doing here? That's where the idea of the public domain is. Now, if you have a private domain, we know what a private domain is. It's a private domain. But what if you have something that appears to be a public domain, but it doesn't have that aspect of 600,000 people, maybe some other aspects to it, how large it is and so forth. So that is where rabbinical law says that it's not actually biblically a public domain, but it's like a public domain. It's similar enough to a public domain. So that is one of those in-between places. The Talmudic term is a carmelis. And only in a carmelis can you put up strings and make an eruv and so forth. You cannot make an eruv in what is called a Reshus Harabim Daraisa, a biblical public domain. Only in what I guess you could call a rabbinical public domain. That's where you can make an eruv. And therefore you're not allowed to carry out all 4 cubits in a public domain, but in what's called rabbinically a public domain, a carmelis, by biblical law you could, but the rabbis made a law that you can't. But then they also made that, since it's that idea of the eruv, in order to modify that we can turn it into this area, you can turn it to a private domain. And that's essentially what the eruv does, is that it makes the whole area one private domain. And not as far as other things, there are other laws of a public domain and private domain, and it's not considered a private domain. Laws of impurity and other laws, certainly, and laws of anything that has to do with ownership and so forth. That part, it's only as far as the Sabbath laws of carrying, that's what makes it a private domain, because you have the walls around it and the sharing of the food, that there's ownership within the Jewish community of a piece of bread. Like I said, usually there's a box of matzah that you might keep in the synagogue for that purpose. So within that eruv, you can carry items. Outside of the eruv, you cannot carry items unless it's for a life or death issue or certain other things. You wear your clothes, so things that are considered clothing that you can wear, but you can't carry something in your pocket. You certainly can't carry something in your hand. There's some who say carrying in the pocket, depending on the type of pocket, how it's attached to the garment, could be okay. Not different things. So anyway, going beyond that, there is no law that you cannot, if you're not carrying anything, carry outside the eruv. Carrying, you can't carry even one step outside the eruv, or 4 cubits outside the eruv, which is, if we say a cubit is 18 inches, there are different opinions how big the cubit is. So we're talking there 72 inches, right? Is how far you're not even allowed to do that. But if you would carry less than that, well, no, because you're already transporting from the public domain, from the private domain to the public domain. But again, if that area outside the eruv is not really a biblical public domain, it's a carmelis, it would be a rabbinical prohibition, but nonetheless it's prohibited to carry anything outside of the borders of the eruv, Chatzeros. However, you do transport. You can walk if you're not carrying anything. You can walk outside of the eruv. The only thing is not the question of the eruv, but the question of the tichum. The tichum Shabbos is if you are in an uninhabited area, then outside, let's say you have an inhabited area, and then that ends. Let's say there's less than, I think the number, I forgot exactly, I believe it's 70 cubits from one home to the next. Any place where from one home to the next is less than 70 cubits, then, so we're talking about 100 feet, from one house to the other. That is called a city, an ear. And from now, once that you have an area where it's more than 70 cubits from one house to the next, that is the end of that city. And so outside of that city, you can only travel 2,000 cubits in any direction from the borders of where the city is. If the city is a rectangle, meaning even if the city is not a rectangle, we create a rectangle around the city. And then outside of that rectangle, you can travel up to 2,000 cubits, a little bit less than a mile, depending on, again, how big we say the cubit is. And then, so that means there's a total of, outside of the city, 4,000 cubits that one could travel, 4,000 square cubits, right? Or more than that, whatever. It's 4,000. No, it's 2,000 by 2,000. So it's, what is it? I guess that's really 40,000 square, whatever. You can go 2,000 in one direction, and really in the north, south, east, west, you can go 2,000 cubits outside of this area that's called a city. So if you have and if there is an eruv around the city, then the whole eruv area is one city, even if there are more than 70 cubits between the houses. But because it's all within one private domain, that is already a city to itself. And if there's houses outside the eruv that continues, you can travel, you could walk all throughout Brooklyn, all throughout Queens, all throughout Manhattan, but you probably can't walk over the bridge to Staten Island. I don't think that's probably too far. It's certainly the Verrazano Bridge is more than 2,000 cubits, but then the question is it all one city because legally it's one city? Well, no, because there's that distance between the one inhabited domain to another. And if there's a big park, that could be an issue, However, if it's all inside of the city, like Central Park, even though the size of it, if it was on the edge, it would be an issue, but the other direction it's not. So anyway, as we were saying, we travel, you can go 2,000 cubits outside of the city. But there's another type of an eruv called the eruv techumen. And what we do with that is that, since he said, right, you can go essentially 4,000 cubits, right? So if you place before the Sabbath some food in a certain place that's within your 2,000 cubits, what you're essentially doing is making that your center. And so you could go 2,000 cubits in the other direction. Almost 4,000 cubits going on. that's basically what the eruv, meaning you can walk a little bit under 4,000 cubits outside of the using an eruv techumen. But the eruv chatzeris, there's no limit. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. How do I turn this thing off?